Yeah, I mean, this kind of feels sketchy. I just have to, like, not pass out in a driveway. Otherwise, somebody might run me over.
Yeah.
Actually, before we get to that, I'm just going to explain this story to chat because it's kind of fucking hilarious. So, like, back in, like, September 12th, 2020, I'm chatting with some friends over the internet. Like, I'm in a call, we're playing games with them and shit. Like, I think some Codebreaker game or something. And I'm drinking. And then afterwards, this guy in my Christian group who we were playing the game with, everyone else gets off, and I'm talking to this guy. He's a really good guy, I think, but he's a Vosh fan, so his mind is kind of poisoned. So we're kind of like debating while I'm continuing to drink like rum mixed with apple cider. And I'm getting distracted from how much I'm drinking because I'm so focused on countering the Vosh bullshit. And and so like I didn't know this because normally I drink around 7 to 9 shots worth, but I think I ended up having like, I don't know, 16 shots worth in my system or something. So that guy gets off call. He has to go for some reason. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in a hospital. And apparently, what happened is I got really wasted. And then I went outside for some reason, passed out in front of my driveway, and my friend and roommate got home in the middle of the night. And I'm wearing all black, and it's the middle of the night. And I'm like on the edge of the driveway. So I'm like blending in with the street. And he like runs over me. And I wake up in the hospital with like a breathing tube down my throat, and I'm like, "What the fuck is going on?" So that was an experience. Like I got run over by my best friend, and since then I haven't blacked out or thrown up from drinking. So I've adjusted my behavior from that obvious excess of vice. Yeah, that's just a thing that.
This sounds like a good night out to me.
An experience.
Yeah, and the fortunate thing is I was blackout. I don't remember getting run, which is fortunate because that sounds like traumatizing as fuck. I wouldn't want to remember that. I'm so happy I didn't.
I'm just happy you made it, dude. That's all.
Yeah. Also, and here's the thing, like getting from a former opiate addict, I was addicted to the fentanyl pound 5 years ago because when I was a freshman in college,
not Floydian.
Yeah, well, when I was a freshman in college, some guy in one of my classes like hooked me up with it for free, like out of nowhere, like just because I did him some like favors and shit, and I got along with the guy. I got addicted to it recreationally, which was really fucking stupid. Ended up getting off of it with the interval increase. But yeah, no, I ended up. But the thing is, here's the thing about it. When I was in the hospital, so I had some like fractures in my pelvis, right? So I couldn't walk without a walker for like a few months. And for those first few weeks where I was in the hospital, I was stuck in bed most of the time. And something I will say about the opiates is, and they were very important killing the pain because I had like a catheter in when I woke up, and it like really bruised the urethra when it pulled it out. So even on the opiates, it hurt to like pee for like 2 weeks. And I couldn't get a boner because as soon as it started, it would just hurt too much. But I mean, aside from the pain killing aspect, which was important, I think the opiates in the hospital where I was stuck in bed almost 24/7 actually helped me keep my sanity in a weird way. So I don't know. I feel like there's kind of this thing where it's like
fucking great. That's why.
Yeah, like exactly.
I mean,
like, I think there's this thing where it's like, it's kind of this mixed bag where it's like I think opiates are like overprescribed for some things, right? But it's kind of like if they fuck with your dick and make your dick hurt, yeah, they should give you opiates. Or like, if you're fucking stuck in bed, unable to get out of that bed, the opiates are going to keep you from going crazy, provided you're not stuck in bed long enough to get like seriously addicted to them. So I don't know.
Say what you like about heroin, but it's moorish as fuck,
I haven't tried a heroin, so I can't confirm or deny.
Neither have I.
Right.
No, I actually haven't. I'm willing to go through.
These things are addictive for a reason, right? It's because they're great.
Surprising.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, here's
That's because
kind of the
they're shit,
thing.
right?
Here's kind of the thing, and this is the really dangerous, right? Is that you'll see this like stereotypical like depiction of someone on heroin, and they're like slumped against a wall, going, "Whoa, man! Like the walls and ceiling are melting." Like that's not what opiates are like. They make you feel really good physically and emotionally, but they don't fuck with your ability to focus and think nearly as much as weed or alcohol does. So the real danger of it, aside from the addictiveness, is that with weed and alcohol, if you get drunk or high, there's kind of a disincentive against doing that all the time because you need to do other shit. So it's like, if you wanted to get like hammered, but you had to like go to work later that day, you're not going to fucking do it. But with an opiate, you can like pop a pill and feel really good and still be able to think and function relatively
like
well.
doing
So there's
coke.
not as much of a inhibitor
Or
based on
speed.
rational self-interest that's going to keep you from doing it all the time.
There was a guy actually who got fired on the boat for taking speed.
Yeah. Speed's fun, though.
So
That's meth, right?
We'll try one day, but not right now.
Quite good for weight loss as well.
Oh, really?
and
Let's go.
tape loss.
Oh,
Dude, I've been
What's that?
eating a lot. I've been eating a lot more. I imagine I'm going to put on some weight. I'm going to have.
Yeah, so moving away from drugs to terrorists.
Oh, we could just go back to drugs, please.
Well, you segue through Afghanistan, don't you? I mean, that's how you get from drugs.
Well, that's how you
many
get drugs and
terrorists-
terrorists.
Well,
Through the
I
opium
honestly
field.
wonder how many terrorists fund themselves sales while saying fuck up the West for being degenerate and doing. I mean,
so we didn't quite hear you, but from what a little I gathered, you're saying that you're asking how many terrorists fund themselves through selling drugs, with the added bonus that selling the drugs also fucks up the West. I believe
not quite.
quite
No,
a lot.
No, not quite. I'm asking how many how many terrorists
lean
fund
closer
them.
to your PC because you break up so much.
But
I'm
it's
asking
because they don't consider using the opiates as being
take my
degenerate.
fucking headphones out. Well, the thing is, like, I'm asking how many terrorists. I'm asking how many terrorists like fund themselves like off of selling drugs, while also saying the West is degenerate because so many people do drugs.
No, but they don't consider the opium to be degenerate.
And even if they did, a lot of them that don't use it are like, oh yeah, it's fine to sell it to the kafir or whatever it is. They don't matter.
No, in like Afghanistan and that, they don't smoke it, but they chew it and stuff. It's not. It's like India have like a pod that they chew and everything, and they don't consider that to be drugs. It is drugs, but they don't consider it to be. There's loads of that sort of shit going on around the world, man.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the thing where I'm like, I don't want Islam to take over. I want Christianity to take over. But like low-key, one of the most based lessons from Christianity is love your enemy. And that doesn't mean let your enemy run fucking roughshod over you. You can still act in protection of the things you value.
I think that's just a mistranslation from Old English. I think it means fuck your enemy.
Well, I think
to engage your enemy in rough coitus to show dominance.
There's one perspective where it's like fuck your enemy, make them suffer because your enemy's suffering is good, and then there's like the we'll call it the progressive Christian perspective of loving your enemy means not fighting them because fighting people is bad. And then kind of the base Christian perspective is you're supposed to love your enemy. If because
the Christians never Christians never engaged in any kind of Christian-based warfare.
No.
Oh, yeah.
You can go to war with them,
that never happened.
But you don't hate them even though you're fighting them. You kill them all and let God sort them out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of the mindset though is that when a Christian engages in fighting, the entire point of the motivation is supposed to be the protection or defense of something valuable. We're not supposed to be motivated by wanting somebody's suffering for the sake of their suffering, let's say.
Yeah. It's God's job to do the judging. You're just arranging the meeting.
Exactly.
Can you explain? Okay, before we go on, I'm sorry for interrupting constantly, but I just want to know what is your idea of the righteous vengeance or righteous wrath?
Are we talking about the righteous wrath of God or the righteous anger of man?
Both. You can go both. Explain God first and then the men.
So kind of the point, or no, I'm going to do man first because that's kind of easier and less.
And mansplaining, of course.
So the point of the righteous anger of man is that it is in defense of something, in protection of something. It's like you see people talking about healthy masculinity, or that guy, I think from Ethan, that professor talking about how one of the cores of masculinity is protection, right? So the point of righteous anger is a passionate defense of something that is valuable. You're not like looking at someone and going, they're a piece of shit, so I'm going to delight in their suffering. You're going, I am going to fight to defend this thing that is good. And if this person proves to not be as bad as I thought, I'm not going to be disappointed because I would have wished that they were worse, so I would feel better about standing against them. I would be happy if they improved as a person because it's like this person is also of intrinsic value. And if they are becoming a better person, that is a good thing. It's not a bad thing that the opportunity for spite is removed from me. So I guess like righteous anger is based around a protective impulse, whereas unrighteous anger is based around kind of a vengeful or spiteful or bitter, resentful, or hateful impulses. I guess the distinction between the two.
Thank you.
And as for the righteous anger of God, in the early church, there was a lot more of a debate about the final end of man, whereas now Christians, the mainstream perspective is that the people who are truly faithful go to heaven and everyone goes to hell. But in the days of the early church, there was much more of a diversity of opinion, where you had quite a few people who believed in annihilationism, which is that the worthy people went to heaven and the unworthy people weren't like tortured forever. They just like stopped existing after they died. Then you had the universal reconciliationist position, which was that God would eventually reconcile every soul to him. And you had some people who were like, yeah, everyone after they die just goes immediately to heaven. And then you have the more base take where it's like, well, no, if you've like fucked your soul in this life, you're going to have to do a lot more work to reconcile to God to get into heaven than somebody else. And so I kind of
take go to hell to like burn off the sin or something, right?
Well, hell, quote unquote. The word hell was never actually in the Bible, actually. It got translated from four other words. It got translated from Hades and Sheol, which were the Greek and Hebrew word for the grave, and from Gehenna, which was a location in Jerusalem, which in older times was used as like a pagan site for like rituals like child sacrifice or torture by fire or some shit. And in Jesus's time, it was used as like a sewage dump. So we used it a lot in metaphors and comparisons and analogies. And then the fourth word was Tartarus. And that's the word that could most appropriately be translated to hell. The only problem is the word Tartarus was only used in the original reference to the fate of the fallen angels, not to humans.
Huh. Okay. Thanks.
You got your like weird theological lesson, semi-Christian, kind of funny.
Well, there you go. So, fundamentalist terrorists that are now running, that are politicians. So, from the post-millennial. Progressive Washington state politician threatened to blow up school bus called children cowards as they fled. When the driver told Goodyear to leave the bus, she said, "You need to calm yourselves down because I could have a bomb. Look how loose my clothes are."
What?
What?
But wait! It gets worse!
Yes.
Fuck
that's-
off!
So, an employee of Seattle who has been called a social justice warrior and is now a progressive candidate for the King County Council threatened to blow up a school bus, then called middle school students cowards as they fled. So,
Really now?
according to court documents obtained by the Post-Millennial, Eubanks Gadier boarded the Highline School District bus on January 12, 2010 as it travelled on its morning route. Once aboard the bus, which was heading to Chinook Middle School, Gadier demanded the driver tell his dispatcher that a national security incident was going on. Gadier then began yelling at the children about America's relationship with Somalia, according to police reports. An audio recording of the incident demonstrated that when the driver told Gadier to leave the bus, she said, "You need to calm yourselves down because I could have a bomb. Look how loose my clothes are." So...
the old female privilege there, knowing that if a man had said that, there would have been very different outcome.
Oh, he'd get shot.
They'd get black
Guns
bagged. Black bagged in a fucking heartbeat if they survived.
Narwhal
Sniper
tooth.
through the window, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or narwhal tooth to death.
As Pam Knight says, why are they involving kids? Do they not have standard? Oh, of course they don't. But yeah, why female privilege not getting shot in the fucking face?
Only in Britain can terrorists be defeated with narwhals.
That was so fucking cool. But notice the police did not stop that terrorist.
No, it was a Polish guy.
That's the thing I have to wonder about, because in America, like, the BLM narrative isn't completely accurate. The police do go overboard some of the time, though. Like, one of the points that conservatives bring up about BLM is that it's like, and I saw this footage and it was pretty fucked up, where some white guy was like chilling in a hotel or apartment and somebody saw him with a water gun, thought it was an actual gun, and he's like holding a water gun in a window, and they're like, "Oh, it's a gun," so they called the police.
Oh yeah, the guy who was on his knees crawling and they fucking shot him.
Yeah, and that was so fucked. And that was so much worse than the George Floyd thing. But the progressives don't care about it because the dude was white. So it's like, I'm not saying that our police never fuck up, but it's kind of like, I'm looking at other people where I'm like, where they're like, "Oh, well, we need to err like hardcore side of like."
Yeah, where was the $10 billion in property damage when that guy was shot?
Yeah, but the thing is like, yeah, no, like that guy is the guy who shot him is a piece of shit and should get like screwed by the legal system. But kind of the point I'm making though is that it's like, you know, they're like, "Oh, you know," and I'm like, well, these things are so relatively rare. Like, what do you want? Do you want our police to become like the police of other countries who are like ineffectual at like punishing people for fucking over children? Like, is that what we want? Like, are we really going to push?
The leftists do want that because they want to fuck children.
Of course they do.
So, on the subject of fundamental terrorism, there was a terrorist attack in Glasgow that you may not be aware of. There was a terrorist attack on Glasgow Airport. I'm gonna say it was like a decade ago, and it took the form of some guys driving a Land Rover with some cans of combustible material. I can't remember if it was petrol or something of that nature in it, straight in through the main doors of the airport, and trying to ignite it. Now, it didn't ignite properly when they did it, but it did set the terrorists on fire.
Yes, I remember this one.
Wait, I remember this.
Quite a bit of damage.
Let him finish.
When the terrorists got out, and then was trying to get into the back of the Land Rover to try and set the charge off, and a baggage handler, can't remember his name now, I used to know it, baggage handler decks him, just fully, and you can see the security video of it, runs up, the guy is completely engulfed in flames, just fucking drops him. Do you think that man's ever bought a drink again?
No, fuck no. Is that the guy who kicked the Is that the guy who kicked the terrorist in the nuts so hard that he that he ripped a tendon?
I'm not sure. He definitely punched them in the face. Anyway, that's for sure.
Another question.
Because I've seen the video.
Well,
This is the thing I wanted to
Dankula
ask.
did a debate with Vosh. Oh, I've got to look at that someday.
Isn't this the guy who said when the terrorists came running towards him on fire, the Scottish guy said, "Mon then," and then kicked him in the nuts?
Who knows? Come on, then. Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, I just think it's fucking class.
Video. I saw Count Dankula's video of it. It was fucking beautiful.
So, going back to a specific radical terrorist.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
So, according to a detective with the King County, Gadir told the arresting officer she was prepared to die. However, no weapons were found in her possession. She eventually pled the felony charges down to a gross misdemeanor before trial. So, that proves two things. One, that the justice system has no teeth. And two, that the police don't just shoot black people, because if anyone deserves to get shot, it's someone who says they have a fucking bomb.
Yeah. Face take.
That's utterly fucking disgraceful.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think too. Actually, if someone comes and says they're a fucking terrorist, put them in the ground.
Yeah, straight in the ground. So, Democrat State Senator Rebecca Saladana said in her endorsement of Gadir, "I will follow Eubanks anywhere." Former radical Seattle City Council member and activist Mike O'Brien called Gadir an amazing leader. It is unclear if Saladana or O'Brien were aware of Gadir's bomb threats against children on a school bus when they gave their endorsements. Have you considered Googling people before you endorse them? Just radical thought.
Yeah.
That sounds like work.
Bombing children is a step further from the example I'm about to give. But like, I know that Black Lives Matter, like, deifying this like activist woman, I forget her name. It's like Akia or some shit like that, who like murdered like 8 police officers and is like on the FBI's like most wanted terrorists list. Like, you have all these modern BLM people who are like, oh, she's such like an inspiration, such a great leader. And it's like, yeah, she's like a fucking terrorist who murdered a bunch of cops just because they were cops.
Yeah, but we know Black Lives Matter and leftists in general hate cops, so that's probably a good thing as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, but it's kind of one of those things where the mask slips, right? Like So for example, we think
student of history, our resident Brainiac, says that their name is Asada Shakur.
Now, me personally, and me personally as a Christian, I try not to hate the people, but like communism itself is like a fucking bad thing, right?
Would you call communism satanic? Not in England, of course, because then you go to prison, but is communism satanic?
I haven't thought about that. No, I would say that communism isn't necessarily satanic, but it's like Cain from Cain and Abel. Like in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain fucking murders Abel because he's jealous that that Abel's more successful than him. So Cain is the first communist, whereas Satan is the first postmodernist, right? But kind of point being, like, for my theological worldview, I try to person specifically or themselves. But we all agree that communism's fucking terrible. We hate communism. Like, none of us would disagree with that. But like, if you had some like terrorist that was just fucking murdering communists in the street, like, we wouldn't fucking praise them and be like, oh, this is like such an amazing person, such a wonderful community leader. And so it's like,
I wouldn't lie.
Celebrating a person who kills cops is kind of a mask off moment for them.
I'm just gonna be honest, I wouldn't cry, but if I was there and could stop it, I would. I mean, I don't see them as people, but still, they might still turn around.
Well, even animals have rights.
Exactly. And who knows, they might actually evolve into humans if we give them enough time.
Speaking of our piece of shit Gadir, she claimed that when she threatened school children with a bomb on a bus, she was being criminalized for mental health issues.
Really?
Okay, sure, we know you're fucking insane, but that still doesn't mean terrorists don't get the bullet too.
Damn, that was some good stuff.
Jesus Christ. I need to mute myself for a second. Just be right back.
I mean, here's the thing that I hate, which is that...
Oh, of course, she supports Palestine.
Well, there's something else that's kind of fucked about the...
Sorry, we've lost you a second.
Oh, shit. What is wrong with my mic today?
It's being super, super cigarette-y.
Yeah, but there's something else that's wrong with, the crime mental perspective, right? You have people who try and get out of guilt for a crime by being like, it's... But the other problem is, if you equate all crime to mental health, then you turn it into a matter of essentially psychological expertise as opposed to a matter of justice. So, under the worldview that all crime is pathological and a psychological disease, then you could justify the government fucking with people's thoughts, even if they had not committed any crime, right? Or you could justify them fucking with it for a much longer period of time than would be proportionate to the crime they committed as oh, well, this is the scientific recommendation on this. You could, much like with a pandemic, you could remove all moral justice considerations from the question and make it purely a medical question of, yeah, let's just give the scientists complete control over a person's mind.
Well,
And that's something that C.S. Lewis writes about in his essay on the humanitarian theory of punishment, which I would recommend to everyone.
Well, you've actually hit on something which, God forbid, I'm just going to do a super, super quick Google to see if it's true, but it came up in... Oh, fuck it, I'm just going to talk about it anyway, because it's an interesting idea, and it's probably got some basis. No. I was watching, and I don't endorse the show because it's fucking progressive. Chicago Med, part of the Chicago bullshit series, and you don't worry about it. It's a TV show from America. That's all, and it's based in Chicago. That's all you need to know.
Never mind.
So, one of the things they bring up is that apparently back in the Soviet era, they had something that they referred to as something or other psychopathy. And as a result, that meant they got to imprison these people in psychiatric hospitals that were just prisons. Because disagreeing with the state, because the state is perfect, disagreeing with the state means you're insane, therefore, etc., etc., etc. And honestly, that's probably one of the things the progressives are after.
That makes perfect sense, because who would go against the state? Because rights and everything good comes from the state and not individual humanity.
Exactly.
Here's the thing, and I feel like this is at the heart of a lot of conflict. And I wrote an entire section of this in my book, but it's that there has to be a necessary harmony between the individual and the social structures, right? And so I feel like this is kind of represented by patriotic liberalism. Liberalism values the individual. Culture of patriotism respects the society and culture. And I feel like between the two, you get that kind of harmony. And I think that was one of the messages in Brave New World, honestly, because you had the world state, which was an entirely anti-individual society. And I don't think John the Savage in Brave New World is a hero. I think he makes some good critiques of the world state, but he has his own problems because through no fault of his own, he's completely cut off from society. His original society rejects him, and the world state is fucking terrible. So he's this anti-social individual. He fucking physically assaults a kid when Lenina tries to sexually proposition him. He's good for rejecting her thoughtness, but physically beating her while yelling strumpet isn't the good response either. And it's the kind of thing where in the Bible,
debatable.
Yeah, in Genesis, you have these two stories, right? Where it's you have the flood thing, right? Where it's humanity is completely degenerate and shit. And it's essentially what Hobbes would describe as man's state of nature, entirely violent. And so, but Noah and his family are different because they have that social structure of the family, and Noah's a good guy. So they do a lot better, right? And now Noah isn't perfect. So after they get off of the ark, Noah gets like blackout drunk and naked and passes out in a tent. And, you know, lucky for Noah, there were no cars around in his time, so he didn't get run over. But I feel like that's a good metaphor for our society, right? It builds the arc, so to speak. It keeps us from drowning, getting murdered, teaches us standards. Sometimes it gets blackout drunk and naked and passes out in a tent. So what do we do about that? And two of Noah's children are respectful of that, but recognize he fucked up, so they like cover him with a tarp. And his other son, like Ham, sees him passed out naked. And even though Noah raised him, provided for him, and saved him from the flood and gave him standards, he's like, fuck this guy. Why should I respect him? So he tries to humiliate him. And that's portrayed as a bad thing. It's like the antisocial element of progressives, where they're like, yeah, our culture might have given us a bunch of shit, but it's not perfect, so fuck it. And so that's like kind of the criticizing the antisocial attitude. And then you have the Tower of Babel as this utopian attempt that rejects the individual and is like, oh, everyone come together, perfect vision. Which, by the way, to any Eurosceptics, the European Union designed its parliament building after an artist's rendition of the Tower of Babel, which shows how degenerate they are. But so, like, the Bible from the very beginning, like, denigrating society or having no society whatsoever, but it also warns against making society everything. So you have to like
just to touch on the Tower of Babel thing with the EU. I am looking forward to buying an apartment in that building when it's finished.
Nice.
Looking forward.
Okay, that one went right over my head. Sorry.
He's saying that the EU's gonna.
Buying...
Yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, when the EU is fucked up and it's yes, we can become
nice
neighbors.
Penthouse. Nice penthouse.
Dibs on the top floor. Dibs on the top floor.
Looking forward to it.
I call dibs.
you realize that in the event of the EU collapsing, that actually Belgium's Brussels specifically economy will just be completely destroyed. So much of its economy is based around servicing that building. all the local services and everything, taxi firms, catering, you know, other offices that provide services and things to that building is almost the entire of that city's economy now.
Well, here's the thing I don't get about like left-wing Europhiles, right? Like left-winger Americans specifically who support the European Union, right? Like, so progressives in the US hate the Electoral College, right? Because it's like, oh, you know, everyone votes, and then their votes are kind of aggregated into these like electors, which aren't entirely put proportional to the population, and they're like, oh, that's anti-democratic. But and then they support the European Union, where the majority of executive and legislative power is put in the commission. And I'm an American, so I might be wrong about this, but from the way I understand it, the country leaders within individual countries are elected, or the governments of specific nations are elected by the people, right? Then those governments appoint a council, and then that council appoints the commission. And it's like the European Union's powers are so far removed from democracy. It's so ridiculous to me how leftists in America can criticize the Electoral College and say it needs to be abolished while simultaneously simping for the anti-democratic nature of the European Union.
There is no democracy in the EU at all. It's a bureaucracy. It's not a democracy. They vote themselves. The bureaucratic arm gets to vote itself extra powers. You don't get to vote them out.
Sounds really true.
Sounds like a dictatorship, you know?
It is. It is. It's a dictatorship.
Do you know what isn't a dictator? What wouldn't be a dictatorship, though? A president who, once he's elected out fairly or unfairly, who just leaves.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But unfortunately, Ursula and her kin is more like, and of course, Guy Verhofstadt, they want a first European
They're-
China for a
For a
thing is, what
safe
you've got to
and secure society. And also
Yeah,
the
but the thing you've
worst
got to
part
remember about them is that majority of them were failed politicians in their own country. Most of them are people who failed to be elected by a democracy, who have
I
gone
know.
into the bureaucratic bureaucracy. It's fucking
Guy is
ridiculous.
despised in his own country. For
Well, you
reasons.
see,
But I mean,
and
but the EU simply will not last. It will not last any significant length of time at all now. It's done.
It's dying.
It's already dying. But one more country out, one more of the big sort of seven, and it's done. I don't know if the Americans are really aware, but when the UK left, when we were in, there were 28 countries inside, and the financial impact of the UK leaving was if the bottom 17 countries had left. Financially,
Well, yeah,
that was the financial effect of the UK leaving.
well, yeah, because from what I remember, because like I'm an American kid about shit, but like I've been watching Sargon, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm cutting out. I'm gonna switch to my phone.
There's one thing I want to point out, though. It's the way that Guy says union. Guy Verhofstadt can't say the word union, because whenever he says European Union, he says it like this. European Union.
Back on my because my
Pisses me off.
laptop is kind of dumb, but like I'm an American, but I also watch Sargon, so I'm familiar with this. But like, yeah, like Britain was the second largest financial contributor to the European Union after Germany, right? They gave the second most money to it. And like most of the countries in
What are
the
you doing to
EU.
children?
What?
What are you doing to children, Oil?
He's feeding them
Ah, good.
from his windowless white van.
I'm just near a park, and you can hear some children playing. It's completely wholesome.
Good
How
stuff.
amazing.
Good stuff.
Screams of horror.
I can't see the children. Maybe they're being fucked by pedophiles. I can't see. But
Well,
I'm guessing they're just
are there
playing.
any Muslims in the area?
Where I live? Fuck off.
What about Antifas?
What? Antifas?
Yeah, they're,
No.
They're also
you'll get a
pedophiles.
video.
No, there's no Antifas in Aberdeen.
Okay, so it's probably not pedophiles. They're probably just playing then. Good
That
stuff.
sort of shit wouldn't get much tolerance up here, I can assure you.
Excellent.
This is a city that is built entirely on oil wealth. Do you think you're going to get a bunch of communists, successful
Communists? Hard work? Nah.
You got
No,
a fair
but I mean,
point there.
anti corporate sentiment in a city completely built on corporate sentiment.
You'd be
I'll tell you something
surprised.
really.
You'd be
I'll
surprised.
tell you something interesting about Aberdeen, right? Aberdeen, as far as I know, is the only city in the UK that has a hospital that has a car park that is free.
Well, there you go.
And why
Wait,
does it have a free
Your
car park?
hospital car parks isn't free?
They're not free in
No,
Australia
you
either.
Really?
But what? But why does Aberdeen have a car park that is free for its hospital?
Because it has people that work for a living?
No, because one guy who owned an oil company called Sir Ian Wood, fantastic guy, had to go and visit his a family member in the hospital while they had terminal cancer, I believe, and was so disgusted at the amount of money that he was paying in parking, built a parking structure for the hospital, and then put a trust together to maintain it forever. It's
Chad.
completely free.
That is pretty
ability
fucking shad.
But that is a fully capitalist oil guy of the highest order, took his own money, built it. And then when he sold off the company and retired, offered our city council 70-something odd million pounds of his money, not of the company's money, of his own personal money, to build a science park. And the council fucked about and didn't take his money, and have now developed the area into a couple of restaurants.
Yeah. That's government for you.
Yeah, but capitalists never do anything good, do they? You know.
Well,
Yeah.
that takes the anarchist idea of who would build the roads and shoots it in the fucking head, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, as far as I know, that is the only hospital in the whole of the UK where it's free to park at all times.
Wonderful.
I mean, that's kind of the thing too, because like I have this like atheist kind of technocrat friend Harrison, who's popped up in the chat on this before. He might have debated some of you listening now in the chat. And you know, I don't agree with him on like a lot of shit, obviously, but it's kind of funny. He's like ethnically Jewish and he fits all of the stereotypes. His dad's like a millionaire, and apparently his dad knew like the top, like the biggest Trump donor or something. So like he's like, well, and he's met Oprah before, and you know, would have been friends to like talk to like basketball stars or something. So this guy's like well connected. But
Been to a
one of the
cocktail
things-
party with Harvey Weinstein and
no
Jeffrey Epstein and Oprah.
Weinstein shit, as far as I know, none of that degeneracy. But because his dad knows a lot of the rich people, right? Like he knows a lot of this like socialist myth kind of shit, where it's like a lot of the rich people, like you have all these socialists who are like, oh, let's fucking take rich people's money from them, especially after they die and shit. They're all just fucking selfish. But like the vast majority of them are like, no, when I die, I'm giving like most of my shit for like a charitable cause or something. And this is kind of one of those things, like the guy who like part of the Industrial Revolution, there was this guy Carnegie in the US. He was really into steel and shit. And admittedly, not all of the progressive critiques against the guy are entirely invalid. He was kind of a dick. He did some kind of stuff that not necessarily good worker conditions. And he became like one of the richest men in the world. And yet when he died, he was like, yeah, no, all my money going into this kind of foundation thing to help people, charity kind of thing. And the money from that is still going. It's still like funding like charitable shit going on. So like this myth of like the rich people who never help anyone out. I mean, their economic transactions giving people jobs already helps people out. There's a culture within rich people of like, yeah, like donating to shit. And like when I die, my money is like going to like help people out and shit and charity. So the whole socialist.
Here's an interesting question then, right? So Bill Gates, he pledged all his money to like 95% of his money or something to charity, right? Bill Gates.
Yeah, so he won't have to give it to his wife in the divorce.
No, he already did that. But now that they're getting now they're getting the divorce. Has she just stolen half of that money from, or maybe more of it, from charity?
Yes.
And will she? And will she be berated for it?
No.
Because he's promised all that money to charity. Is she going to honor that when she dies?
Of course not.
What do you think?
And as
if any other money would be left by the time she dies.
Yeah. And so, like, Bill Gates is kind of like a mixed bag. I'm going to do a controversial thing and sort of defend Bill Gates. Bill Gates does, like, a bunch of fucked shit. Like, apparently he was, like, involved in, like, the whole try and fuck Trump out of getting reelected thing, right? So it's like, that's kind
of course he has. But he's also been on Epstein Island, hasn't he? So
I guess, yeah, I didn't know about that, but it's also like...
Well, that's probably why he's getting divorced, right?
Yeah, well, it's also like, because you know, whatever else you want to say about...
If you look, there's a lot of stuff happening where people are shifting around, there's a lot of divorces, lots of people moving and stuff. Because they're getting ready for Ghislaine Maxwell to start spewing fucking beads.
Yeah. So it's like Bill Gates done a lot of fucked up shit, but as far as criticism of rich people goes, I mean, Bill Gates put like a lot of money into like trying to eradicate diseases like malaria and shit. And to give a more moral example, right? You have Mike Lindell. Dude makes a bunch of money selling like pillows and shit. And very inspiring story. I'd recommend everyone to like check it out. But like the dude used to be like a drug addict. Like fucking so bad that the drug dealers were like, man, I'm not selling you any shit right now. You're like too fucked up. Like where the drug dealers were like, I'm not selling this guy some shit because like I feel bad for him that he's like taking all this shit. And then like he had his whole Christian journey. He found God, got off of drugs, but he starts the My Pillow company, and everyone hates him now for supporting Trump. But like during the COVID pandemic, he like put 75% of his factory output into making masks purely charitably. So it's like, the myth of like these rich people who just sit on their money like Scrooge McDuck is obvious nonsense.
Yeah, but do you know where this myth comes from? Pure, unadulterated jealousy and spite. Every
Yeah.
single one I speak to who has this ideology are just jealous because it's always, but why them and not me? Every single
Yeah.
time. Why them, not me?
Well,
Jealousy, spite.
and that kind of thing. And I feel like this is where the Joker movie comes in, because I've heard like arguments about whether it's like really a left wing or right wing movement, where it's like, oh, like
Yeah, I didn't catch that. What?
there's this debate about whether Joker is like pro leftist or pro right wing. And it's kind of like, and leftists who like sent for the Joker will try and argue, oh, it's against like the rich people. But the point in the movie that is particularly interesting is like they don't get mad at Thomas Wayne for being rich. Like the moment they get mad at him is when he starts like talking down to like poor people and normies and being like, oh, they're all just like a bunch of jokers and shit. Like the moment where the social outrage starts is where the rich person starts socially acting like they're on some sort of pedestal. It's not about them having money. Like a rich person could have a bunch of money and fuck off, and most people wouldn't care. It's the elitist attitude of fuck the normal person that got the people in the Joker pissed off. That's when the clown movement really started. Not because Thomas Wayne was rich, because evidently he'd done a lot of charitable shit. It's when he started shit talking people who had problems and stuff and saying, oh, they're just a bunch of
Alarm is
assholes.
going off. I need to check it out. Be right back.
I,
Okay, so go ahead and carry on, second.
I mean, that's pretty much it. Like how the real point of change was that,
I think you're right. A lot of people go, oh yeah, rich people, they're rich because quite often maybe privilege or something. Just don't, as student history says, be rich and be happy, don't talk down to me. Abso-freaking-lutely. Especially if they're the kind of rich person you've been describing who does spend a lot of time and effort going into charitable institutions and whatnot.
Yeah, but I really do enjoy talking down to poor people.
Don't make me go all communist on you. Filthy bourgeoisie.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I am.
Okay, so...
I'm all sports cars and cigars.
Yeah.
yeah.
Sports cars and cigars is not a bad idea.